Ladies and gentlemen, whatever sport you watch, whatever player you support, whatever team you like to root for, every single one of your favorite sports entities generally has an arch rival. And in chess, we enjoy our El Clásico all the time between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. And in today's video, I will show you a game, their first high-level game that they've played in the year 2026. And it was a doozy. Something like 90 overall moves, which means about 180 total moves. They managed to play an entire half a game of those moves with less than 20 seconds on the clock. And it was epic. It was insanely tense, insanely close, all the way to the very end. And the average rating of this game is 3,380. So a little bit higher than your rating, maybe like 10 times higher. And so we will get into it, and that's really all I have. Chess is in a weird spot. Like if you're watching in 2026, do let me know. I'm curious to hear your story in the world of chess. Have you been playing since the pandemic, which at this point is 6 years ago? Like what? Some of you are 6 years old watching this video, which is crazy. Or if you're just like a little bit newer into it. There is a gradual, slow decline and people getting back to work, getting back to school in the new year. So a little bit less chess being played, but we do have the candidates in the World Championship this year. So that should be fun. But yeah, a little bit less excitement. But anytime these two get together, there is plenty of excitement. So let's go. E4. This is a 5-minute game with no bonus time. That is the new time control of the Title Tuesday tournament. At this point, Magnus Carlsen is leading the tournament by 1 point, and Hikaru needs to play for a win with the black pieces to equal him in the standings. And so he plays the Sicilian defense. If you're going to play an opening for a win with black, you can play the Sicilian. If you want to play an opening to lose with black, you can play plenty of openings, but then you will get a much worse position than the Sicilian. Magnus plays knight to f3, preparing the move d4, and Hikaru plays knight c6. This move already grants white a little bit of extra options and a little bit more information, and he no longer has to play the move d4. He can opt to put the bishop on b5 to immediately put pressure on this knight. This is known as the Rossalimo. Fantastic opening. Very, very rich, very dense opening. Now the three main moves here are pawn to g6, pawn to e6, and kind of like knight to f6 maybe. But Hikaru plays a little bit of a sideline. He plays d6, which is a very daring move in many ways because it sort of baits white in many positions into taking this knight, because that's what he wanted to do anyway. And black had other useful moves, and generally if you're going to take here, you kind of want to go d5, but you already moved d6, so you're kind of losing time. Anyway, Magnus castles, and Hikaru plays bishop d7. This is certainly one of the ways to play this position. You're, of course, ready to take with the bishop now. White plays the move rook e1, centralizing the rook, putting pressure, maybe going e5. Hikaru plays knight f6, developing. White now plays the most common move c3, looking to expand in the center with d4. Now you're going to see something very rare, something that I've seen before, but something that will shock you. a6, not this move, right? Attacking the knight. Hey, take me, stupid. That's why you went there. Well, now Magnus shows you why he played the move rook e1. It's because white in this position retreats the bishop literally to the home square. And I know, this is utterly idiotic. I have a slow run on this channel. I have tons of instructional content. I have a series called How to Win at Chess. I have a series called How to Lose at Chess, where I show you guys how not to play chess. And if I had a student that played a move like this in the middle of a game, I would be like, idiot, what are you doing? Why are you not keeping the bishop out there? How do I explain this? The way that white played the opening, with the bishop going to b5 on move 3 and then returning on the 7th move, you kind of forced black into developing in a certain way with the pawn, the knight, the bishop, and this pawn. And now taking the knight makes no more sense. But you made black commit 4 moves, including that pawn move. And now since the bishop no longer needs to be out here because where it's going to get attacked, or here where it's going to block everything, or here where it's going to lose a pawn, you put it on f1. And actually, on the very next move, when you play d4 and gain back space in the center, then you can bring the bishop back. And despite what it seems like a colossal waste of time, it's actually all very sophisticated. But of course, as always, the age-old wisdom. When you do it, you're stupid. When they do it, it makes sense. Bishop g4. And Hikaru, right on cue, does not want to play e6, does not want to play g6. He knows that white is potentially expanding in the center, and so he pins the knight to the queen, which destabilizes white from playing the move e5. Magnus plays h3, and now Hikaru actually has to lose the bishop, so of course, logically, he moves the bishop 1, 2, and 3 times, precisely what we teach you not to do. But at least now white cannot play the move d4 anymore, and black plays g6, looking to set up a typical dragon, d3, bishop g7, white develops the knight, and Hikaru castles. And after 11 moves, we have the following position. Very rich position. Black has traded off the light-squared bishop. In the process, white has lost the ability to, with a free hand, expand in the center. White is going to have to play his position a little bit like a Rubik's Cube, to kind of move pieces to certain places, kind of swap everything around like this. Meanwhile, black will also try to build up in the middle. Queen back to d1. We see a lot of returning to the home squares. Black will not be returning anything else to the home squares. And now we have b5. Another very interesting move is bishop to h6, which looks stupid because you've already moved the bishop. But because white has blocked his own bishop, trading white's dark squared bishop and removing your potentially bad one stuck over here is another possibility. But b5 is a very normal move. And Magnus plays knight f3, and Hikaru drops the knight back to d7 to, again, fight for the center, to potentially use his f-pawn in the future, to put the knight over here, to avoid the knight getting attacked, and so on. And white plays d4. From the opening, it is Magnus who has the advantage. Magnus has virtually done nothing. Every piece he has is on the first rank, except the knight. But he dominates the center. He has good central positioning of the pawns. And from here, he will maybe play a move like a4. He will decide whether he will go d5 or e5. He'll decide whether he's going to go try to trade off the bishop and attack. h4, h5 is possible. Let's see what happens. Hikaru, meanwhile, justifying his dark squared bishop's positioning, playing the move b4. And this is 3380 level chess. Like, really, this is a very, very high level battle. Very fascinating to watch two people who just know what squares the pieces should go to. Like, when I look at this position, and I see that, you know, the attack is kind of coming in here. You know, I kind of want to stabilize the center. Maybe I want to go queen a4 and target the knight, or go d5. Magnus plays bishop e3, stability on the center of the board. Hikaru chops on c3, and now this pawn is certainly weak. The b file is slightly open. Queen a5 could potentially attack. Knight b6, then, and knight a4 could be used also to attack the pawn on c3, and that's what Hikaru does. Natural move here for white could be to drop the bishop back. We see that in typical, you know, Grunfeld positions. That might not mean anything to you. With white, I would be very weary about playing queen c2, because black can always attack on the c file. And actually, Magnus plays bishop d2, and he spent a lot of time on this move. He obviously did not want to play bishop to d2. And here, black can play rook b8, and black can also play queen a3. This little maneuver to meet this bishop, like I said, is seen in the Grunfeld. And from here, I mean, it really looks like from this early position, even though white is better, I mean, black's position looks very, very nice. Magnus, bishop c4. Finally, the bishop has been reactivated. It is impossible to attack. Well, wait a second. Yes, it is. I don't quite understand what the idea is. Clearly, he is baiting Hikaru into the move knight b6. Where he would potentially be blocking his own rook, and maybe that's not even where the knight wants to go, which is very fascinating. And now Hikaru plays a move I don't understand whatsoever. He plays queen to c7, giving up the pawn on a6 completely, just losing it. But the idea is that now the pawn can take on d4, because the bishop is going to no longer hit the queen, which means that this is actually just a threat. Queen c7 is a retreating move and a threat, so I do understand the move a little bit. Maybe I'm being a little bit theatrical. Magnus plays rook c1, stabilizing the c-file. Rook c1 tactically defends the pawn on d4, because after this capture, there would be a discovered attack on this queen. If black went takes, knight takes d4, you would take on f7 with check, and the rook would hit the queen. Rook c1, defending the d-pawn by hitting c7. This is the absurd 3400 level vision that we are operating with. Rook c1 is a normal move, but it's just like amazing that it can be played in 2 seconds. Rook b2, meanwhile, is the best move for black. Black needs to infiltrate white's position, potentially bring a level of support, put pressure on the second rank, and play knight b6 without blocking the rook on the b file. Now we have a4. a4, a logical move, simply removing the pawn from ever being taken. That's really what Magnus was doing there. And now rook fb8 looks like a normal move. The computer likes queen b7, queen b6, and queen a7. And Hikaru chooses queen to a7, getting the queen off of the c line, defending the pawn on a6, and immediately adding with diagonal pressure over here. It's just amazing. And they're even on time. They're both taking around the same amount of time, but they both made 20 moves. So they both made 40 ply. And keep in mind, this game was 90 moves. So we have 70 more moves to go in this game, which is unbelievable, right? So bishop to e3, a move that was to be expected. And at some point, black is going to run out of easy moves. Now he has to move the knight to the edge of the board, and Magnus brings the bishop again back to f1. So this bishop has gone to b5, F1, C4, F1. It's just like a tennis ball, like off a wall, you know? Hey, in New York City, we have these things called handball courts. Look it up. I'm not talking about European handball, when you play with the hand and the blue ball against the wall, right? And people go to their local parks, which are frequently under apartment buildings, and they play handball or tennis against the wall at 7 in the morning with people sleeping. This is the most deranged antisocial behavior. I can't even, don't do that, okay? If it's 7 in the morning, sit in your house and drink coffee, okay? Go home. Anyway, bishop is like a tennis ball. Knight to b3. Hikaru has equalized. Apparently, it was better to put the bishop on d3 to then potentially support rook c2, rook b1 with this passive bishop again. Hikaru jumps in with his knight. He forces a crazy decision out of Magnus, by the way. Like, White could have went something like rook b1, but Magnus takes on c5. So he's losing the stable center. He's losing the stable center. He obviously saw something that he didn't like. Potentially, it could have been rook b1. There would have been a trade, and then maybe black could chop on d4 and hit the bishop. So we have dc5, and Hikaru jumps back, and this is a definite improvement. White just lost the key center pawn. Black, meanwhile, has an incredibly well-coordinated position. Everything is standing nicely. The queen will get out of the pin. I don't even know what white is supposed to attack here. Magnus plays rook e2, clearly unhappy with the position, trying to remove one of the active pieces. Hikaru very happy to oblige, by the way, because now he has a free move. He unpins himself. Who is protecting the pawn? It is attacked 2 times. You cannot defend it 2 times in one move. It's not possible. So what do? Maybe, or you can defend it with something worth less than the knight and the queen, which would be a pawn, which would not be possible. So, knight d2. That's tricky. So now if you take on e4, the idea could be, if you were just looking at this position briefly, oh my goodness, something got in my eye, and I think it's an eyelash, and I have eyelashes that are probably longer than 99% of the population, so all right, we're gonna have to battle that one later. You know when you gotta like put eye drops and get the eyelash to the corner of the eye? I mean, goodness me. Oh my goodness. So it looks like the idea is knight e4, bishop to f3, pinning the knight to the queen. But the idea actually could very well be knight takes, queen takes, and then I just grab this pawn on a6. And let's not forget, in every position that these guys play, they are always looking at the transformation to an endgame. And if one person is just left with an a pawn and the other person does not have an a pawn, well, that's going to be really bad news because the person with the a-pawn is going to promote the pawn. And when you are escorted by bishops that support from a distance, it's going to be very problematic. So, rook c8, okay? Rook c8, a5. Now the pawn on a6 for black will stand there forever. Hikaru clearly feeling like Magnus is doing Magnus things. Magnus is like a jiu-jitsu practitioner. If anybody knows jiu-jitsu, it's the art of scooting around on your butt and trying to like lock a limb and then like make the other person tap out. I mean, I'm joking, but those are the memes of the internet nowadays. Magnus is like the guy who's like on his back and he looks defenseless, and then you like, you know, kind of go in, and then all of a sudden he locks your toe and rips it off your body. He's able to generate offense from seemingly strange situations. So queen c6, queen c2, and still black has some questions to answer. Like, if you lose this pawn, what's going to happen? Hikaru plays rook b8. Both guys are now going under the 2-minute mark. So they have this position, a very tense middle endgame, middle game that could very quickly become an endgame if anything gets traded. The pawn on c3, potentially soft. The pawn on a6, potentially soft. Magnus plays bishop takes a6. So he commits about like 40% of his remaining time. What was that? Not quite, but you know, a huge chunk of his time. If queen a6, you're going to go queen a4. We're going to get this outside pass pawn. Problem is Hikaru jumps in with his knight. The a and the c pawns have been swapped. Magnus does get the outside pass pawn, and he does get the queen to c4. But how do you play this position like after this? I mean, if you're going to trade these queens, you know, the pawn's going to promote. But the best move here for black is knight c5. A double horse interference. You put one horse between these two, and you put another horse between these two. Call that the Mongolian gambit, the double horse gambit. Knight c3, knight c5. Hikaru plays the second best move, queen a8. Retreating the queen, eyeing the bishop still, but from the other side, a5 juicy if you move the bishop. It's just an incredibly high-level game. Like, what do you play here? Right, with white, it looks like you play rook c3, bishop c3, queen c3. 2 pieces for the rook. That's always a good deal. No, because then your queen stops guarding the bishop. So what do you play in this position? Oh, I don't know, just a little king move. Just a little king improving move to the side of the board before you want to commit anything. Now, black has only one move for advantage. Only one. Only one move, because white doesn't really have a threat. So what does black do here without overreacting? Hikaru finds the best move with 118 on the clock. Now the boys are in a bullet game, and they have to make 120 more moves from this point. Total, 60 approximately, if you count the pairs. Knight c5 is the best move, because at this point, you need white to give away his bishop pair. Those bishops are going to be a long-term problem for Hikaru. The knight on c5 doesn't just hit the bishop, it also hits the pawn, and frankly, this bishop is trapped. Like, it's attacked twice. It cannot move because it cannot go here. So you have to give this away. D takes c5. You might be wondering, what about queen c5? Well, then a6 hangs, right? This is also going to bring stability to the center. Black is going to be able to put the bishop on d4, where it can hit f2. Black also has bishop e5. You have rook b2 whenever you need it, attacking on the second rank. Opposite colored bishops benefit the party that's attacking, because if you're attacking, the other side can't defend with their opposite colored bishop, right? So rook c2, Magnus has 54 seconds. Rook b4 from Hikaru, not the best move. He makes a mistake. In this position, the best move for black, obviously, is h5. I cannot even begin to explain the move h5 to you, but e6, which is a close second, I can explain to you. I think in many lines, it basically blocks various attacks. Also, it potentially opens up the bishop going to f8 in some positions to defend the pawn on c5. And bishop d4 also becomes more of a possibility in certain positions. You can also play things like queen c6 and e6, etc. Okay, but e6 is apparently the best move. Rook b4 allows queen c5. And now the problem is queen c5 is also going to attack that pawn on e7. So white can win 2 pawns and not have this defensive measure. Right, so now queen c5 comes in and Magnus is better. Hikaru has made a mistake. This was his idea. I think his idea might have been rook a4. I think his idea was rook b8, rook b4, rook a4 to hit the pawn. But I think here he realized there was a tactical problem. Rook a4, maybe bishop c4 was coming in with a counterattack, and he messed things up. He has to play rook b8. The boys have 50 seconds on the clock, and suddenly Hikaru is on the defensive. Magnus has figured out yet another position. The outside pass pawn going to be extremely useful. Now, rook c8 counterattacking the queen. The queen slides over to b4, simultaneously defending the pawn and keeping an eye on the knight. Rook c3 is still not possible. Hikaru, queen a7, and now Magnus is winning. Magnus is winning here. If he plays the move knight to f3, he does play the move knight to f3. He stops anything from going to e5. He will now just reposition his pieces, and then he's going to advance the a-pawn. And a long time ago, I said that white would have, black would have problems dealing with white's outside pass pawn, and that's exactly what's happening. Somehow, it always happens. 40 moves into the game, Magnus Carlsen freaking figures it out. Rook b8 from Hikaru, the best move is now the very natural queen a3. And I mean, it's basically just looking like I'm going to take this knight, I'm going to push my pawn, I'm going to play e5 closing the diagonal, and white is going to win the game not so fast. In half a second, Hikaru Nakamura plays knight to d1, infiltrating on the first rank, and suddenly, this random innocuous king to h2 comes back to bite, because Hikaru is actually threatening to take the pawn on f2, and knight b2 is possible in a lot of positions, maybe going back around. So what do you do in this position? I mean, king g1 looks possible, but then rook b1 might come in some positions. Not right away, there is rook c8 check, but you get my point. There might be knight f2 ideas and so on. So king g1 is what he plays, and now knight takes f2 is actually possible. Knight f2 and rook b2 would be a crushing counter-attacking mechanism, which Hikaru actually doesn't spot. He doesn't spot knight f2 in this position, instead opting for bishop h6, and Magnus is now officially completely winning, but he doesn't have a lot of time to find the right resource here. He was still looking at knight f2 and bishop e3 ideas, and what he wanted to do here is play a quick move and get himself out of danger, but queen c5 would have maybe sealed the deal, but he plays king f1, he gets himself out of danger, and now Hikaru brings the bishop back to g7. Magnus is winning once again. Now he opts for the queen trade, but here comes counterplay from Hikaru in the form of an attack on the bishop, and rook b1 is still possible. It's amazing that all this happening, Hikaru has prevented the pawn from actually moving forward, because if it went forward at any moment, it would have been impossible for black to get the pieces moving, because the pawn would be threatening to promote. Here comes Magnus's king. The king runs into the middle of the board, and rook d8 arrives. The knight can just be given away because queen d3 is on the board. Magnus uses his knight to play defense, and Hikaru finds, out of nowhere, the only defensive resource with 20 seconds on the clock, bishop to d4. Suddenly, the queen is hanging, and the knight escapes. The knight has escaped from the asylum. It hits f2. It just grabs a pawn. The bishop is hanging. The rook is defending the queen on the other side of the board. Queen d7, rook d7. Finally, Magnus can breathe a sigh of relief. He has the game exactly where he wants it, which is an outside pass pawn endgame. Hikaru's time is ticking to stop that pawn. 2 squares to promotion. He plays bishop back to a7. This is the 47th move of the game. They have less than 20 seconds each, and they are about to play another game. This is move 47, and this game went 90 moves. They're literally about to play an entire other game with 18 seconds on the clock. Like, this is completely unfathomable. Not only is it the speed, it is the level at which they play. So, rook b2, simple idea. Rook to b7. Watch how little time they spend for these moves. Knight takes d3 from Hikaru, played in less than 2 seconds. Knight takes d3, and rook d4 attacking the pawn. Hikaru anticipates a defensive move from Magnus, but actually, rook b7 comes in 1 second. But Hikaru was ready for it. In 0.4 seconds, he grabs here. And the point is that if the king goes to attack, he has rook e3, rook d3. So now he's ready for Magnus to make a different move, which is king d2. Bishop e3 arrives with a check. Now king here and rook a4, and Magnus can't push his pawn anymore. He can't play a7. So he needs to regroup, but keep the pace. So he plays knight to b4, but Hikaru right back there attacking the knight. King b3 attacks the rook. The rook goes to the a5 square. It looks so congested. King c4 hitting the bishop. And watch this. If Hikaru moves the bishop all the way over here, it is possible, but then rook e7 is going to hang. You're going to lose a bunch of pawns. White can keep making moves. So Hikaru goes for it. Bishop b4. And this is so wicked. Black is completely winning here if you take the bishop, because then rook a6 and rook a2, and you simply win the pawns. Magnus had set a trap. In half a second himself, he plays a7. Could it be that black is losing? Because you are threatening rook to b8 and a8 queen, and on top of that, you are threatening king b4. Now, black could maybe go for king g7 business here, but that would probably lose, because I would take on b4, and then I would run my king and help promote the pawn. Hikaru finds the only defense. Bishop back to d6, played in 0.6 seconds. Rook to b8, check, an incredible move, you can't take it. But Hikaru planned on it. King g7, a8, rook a8, rook a8. This is the endgame. Objectively speaking, this endgame is a draw. The king and the 2 pawns, and the king, bishop, and 4 pawns on the same side of the board. The king, bishop, 4 pawns just make an impregnable fortress. Like, white has no way in. It's not possible. The spikes are all over the place. You could maybe get your king there, rook here, win this pawn, but it's like, that's lunacy. That's never going to happen. And they both have 11 seconds on the clock, and this is only the 59th move. Hikaru finds a way now to run with his king. Magnus has to pre-move every single move, so he plays rook a7, king g5. Now the white king could get back, but Magnus plays rook b7, and before he knows it, this position is actually losing. This is a losing endgame. The black king has made it to the most active possible square before white was able to set up a defense. Now the king goes to e4, in comes h5. Not the most accurate. Apparently f5 was better, but it doesn't particularly matter. You leave the king exactly where it is because the white king cannot get close. When Magnus comes back to play defense with 9 seconds on the clock, here comes g5. And Magnus is not going to be able to survive much longer because e6, and now f5 is coming with 9.5. You still have to win this game, by the way. It's not just about winning the position. You have to make sure you don't lose on time. So we have rook to d2, f5 check. The white king is pushed back. Now we have bishop f4 attacking, and you pre-move the next move immediately. You don't even think about it. Look at these 4 pawns go, e5, f5, g5, h5. Now here comes e4, so the king can't get closer. Now we have bishop to e5. Apparently this is a draw, by the way. Apparently in this position you were supposed to move the other pawns. But you don't know this. Every move is trying to come in with half a second. e4, bishop e5, repositioning the bishop, taking away squares from white, king f4. Now the game's a draw, but Magnus is down 2 seconds. That's extremely important as you are in a scramble. Rook e1, king e5, Hikaru making a couple of king moves, and now Hikaru is re-winning. I don't quite understand. The way that you survive here with white is that you would need to sack the rook for 2 pawns. So if you play rook f1, f3, takes, and everything trades, that would be a draw, king and bishop versus king. But if you don't do that, you're probably just going to win the game. So rook f1 is what he plays, but after king f5, white has to make a move. White no longer can control the f3 square with every single piece, so Magnus has to play rook d1, and in comes the absolutely fatal blow, pawn to f3. King f1 from Hikaru, from Magnus, king e5, and black is simply winning because you're going to play e3 and e2, and that's the end of the game. We have pawn takes f3, which is apparently the wrong pawn, by the way. G takes f3 was better, and now it's actually Hikaru who is down on time. I don't know how Magnus managed to out-scramble him here, but Hikaru is the one down on time. Now you can play rook to e1, rook e1 check play, but he loses a lot of time because he didn't expect that move. King f4 from Hikaru, 2.5, 2.2, rook d1 back. Now we have g3, which is losing. It's losing because both of these moves were pre-moved. I think he was not expecting rook d1, and when Magnus went rook d1, he was not expecting g3, so he pre-moved this move, and now you have king e3, king back to f4, g2, and with 1.1 seconds on the clock, Hikaru wins the game. 90 move game, 88, but How did they play an entire endgame with 20 seconds? How did they get from here at such a high pace and high level to come up with all of these defensive resources like rook b8, and then Hikaru having the mindset of like, wait a minute, 0.3 seconds, this is actually totally fine for me, runs the king to g3, and then gets all the pawns moving. This is an impossible endgame to defend with white, impossible. And yet Magnus, in a scramble, managed to get a winning position. He managed to accidentally make Hikaru blunder because just like, he just defended so tenaciously. He was threatening the draw and everything. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's just like for a 5-minute game, I know this is not 90-minute chess or classical or whatever, but for a 5-0 game, this was played at like such a level. Yeah, and these guys would sit here and tell you they played horribly and they're both idiots and they both made blunders and I'm overhyping and whatever, but like to the naked eye watching a game like this is just like the way they play their middle game in Blitz, just the quality of game is so much higher than any of us can ever aspire for. It's really crazy. It's really, really crazy. And it's cool to see. And Magnus went on to win the tournament despite Hikaru beating him in this game. And that's life. That's how it goes. Multiple people enter a tournament and Magnus Carlsen wins. That's the chess world. That is all I have for you in this video. I'm recording this in January. If you're a chess fan who follows daily, there's multiple tournaments going on that I will be covering. Please don't complain in the comments. I'll cover the Rapid and Blitz that's happening in India. I will cover the tournament in Vike, which happens every January. And we keep on moving, and I have a match coming up in a week, so that'll be exciting. That's all I have for you today. Get out of here.